You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players, and all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
All right, Hayden, I got a bit of a light question for you. Started off with, how's summer over there? It just like, it always dawns on me that as the weather gets worse over here, it's cold, rainy, icy, just terrible weather, that you are entering just a beautiful summer over in Australia. What is that like? Have you been enjoying yourself? Do you get out a lot? Do you go to the beach? Like, I don't even know what it's like in the land down under, as they say.
In theory, it's summertime, yeah. We've had some okay weather, but we've also had these really kind of crazy like tropical storms roll through. So, Sunday was like beautiful, really nice weather. Then Monday, all of a sudden, there's just like sideways rain, 100 mile an hour winds. I don't know if that's wrong, 100 kilometer an hour winds, and just like crazy weather. So it's been an interesting start to summer. We'll see how it unfolds. But no, I mean, I get out. I'm not a big beach fan, but definitely get out for walks and things like that.
Is it like a tropical climate in Australia, or because I've heard that Sydney was kind of like California?
It's subtropical. So Queensland, which is the northern part of Australia, is more tropical, but it's more subtropical. So you get a bit of a mix, but you get a lot of like thunderstorms and especially in this time of year. So we are this time of year. So that's the weather. Talking weather. That's how we've degenerated over 88 episodes of Arsenal Passes. We're now talking about the weather. But Brendan, just come on down to the Southern Hemisphere and hang out. There's a calling in February. We can.
Yeah, I need people to lobby for me to go down and cast that calling, and I'll be there, no problem. Speaking of weather, I actually woke up this morning at about 6 a.m. to tornado sirens. That's Texas weather for you. It never actually comes through my area, but yeah, I woke up to what sounded like a bombing raid or something. I was like, well, I had no idea what was going on.
Well, just come play, and better weather potentially. Surely better weather. Much worse. Well,
you overestimate my abilities.
Welcome back to episode 88 of Arsenal Pass. We are talking Dynasty and Classic Constructed and how this metagame has started to unfold. We're now about a month into Dynasty post-release. We've had a number of Battle Hardens around the world, as well as some other smaller events for us to draw on. And we're now hitting the holiday break hiatus before we basically come back in January and we hit the ground full steam running with Battle Hardened season again and ProQuest season. We now know that Outsiders is coming in March. So we have this kind of smaller condensed season that's going to include some callings, some Battle Hardens, and ProQuest season with Dynasty, which is effectively going to be January, February. So looking forward to it. We've just had announced that there is calling Indianapolis and calling Auckland happening in February as well. So a lot of events to look forward to. Brendan, will you be heading up Indianapolis? I'm going to be heading over to Auckland to play that event for sure.
Yeah, I think that almost guaranteed I'll be going to Indianapolis, whether it's to play. Hopefully it's to commentate. But I'd be super happy playing that. I played the last calling in Indianapolis. Did, I guess, decently well. That was the tournament where I lost D-Root for the win in for top 8 on stream. So some interesting memories. But yeah, Indianapolis is cool. I'm happy for there to be another calling circuit, like we talked about before. It's something that I've wanted to come back, that level of competitive play, sort of below the Pro Tour, below Worlds, but above these like Battle Hardened. So yeah, I'll be in Indianapolis. I would love an excuse to go over to Auckland again. Take Hayden out to the best restaurant in the world, which is Pasture in Auckland. Nothing comes close. It's the best.
I'm just going to go, by the way. I'm going whether it's by
you
myself.
Really should.
It's
absolutely amazing. Like it's the best. It's the best. And I don't know if Auckland is normally known for its food, but Pasture is above and beyond.
All right, I've been to some pretty good restaurants. I'll tell you what though, so Brendan, my issue I have with restaurants and us talking about food is that please don't hate me, people. Please don't hate me. I have not had an above average meal in the United States of America, and I've been to tried to go to some nicer restaurants. So I am apprehensive. But to be fair, I think particularly in Melbourne and Sydney, we're really spoiled with amazing food options and restaurants in this part of the world. So Brendan, you come over to Sydney or we go to Melbourne, I'll take you some good spots as well. Don't you worry.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we went to any good restaurants
We've
while we
been
were together.
together.
No.
We've been to.
We
like,
went to Del Frisco's, which is like it's basically like the Chili's of steakhouses. It's considered like a nice fancy restaurant, but it's a chain. I don't know.
You were talking it
You
up.
really no. Honestly, you really understand what Del Frisco's is if you go to the one in New York, because they like offer you like this like subscription package and like all this. And you're like, what is going on here?
Timeshare. Timeshare steak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the timeshare steak. Yeah, Del Frisco's it's fine. And then I think when I was in New York, he didn't come with me to to Kaiseki Room, which was freaking amazing sushi. So yeah, next time. Well, maybe the Pro Tour will be in New York, and then
Looks
I can take
likely.
you out to an actual decent restaurant in the United States.
Lock it in. All right. Anyway, enough about food. How was your week in Flesh and Blood, Brendan? Did you play? Have you been playing any Flesh and Blood? You know, people are going to start to question whether you are a Flesh and Blood player. You're going to get comparisons drawn to Tan and Grace.
Oh no, hopefully not. At least not for many years. Yeah. No, I haven't been playing much, to be honest. I am just taking a break a bit before the ProQuest season. Because I do play. Yeah, so I intend to play pretty much every single weekend during ProQuest, which I don't really have an incentive to do that. Like I don't need the PTI or anything, but I want to. I find it enjoyable, and that's sort of like a grind and a challenge, and you can win. I think tournaments that are good, fun to win, I guess, or whatever. But so yeah, taking a break up until then, so I haven't been playing much. Have been playing quite a bit of Marvel Snap. I was like really, they came out the new season. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get a quick hit Infinite really quick, and I got to like rank 90 in like a few hours, and then holy shit, dude, my slog from 90 to 100, which is their highest rank, has been absolutely miserable. So far, they have this card called Leader, and it makes me want to punch myself in the face every time someone plays it against me. Yeah, so that's been taking up a bit of time, but yeah, I'm going. Yeah, definitely back in Fab for the ProQuest season, and planning to play Kano or play Dash, and have fun with it. I think that this meta it's exciting for what it is, and you get to experience Dynasty during this ProQuest season and some of these high level events that we're right into Outsiders for the upcoming Pro Tour.
Yeah, we'll let you piggyback on the back of our testing. How about that? We'll give you a deck for ProQuest or for this Indianapolis calling. I mean, I planned the same to not play much Flesh and Blood. I didn't plan to start testing for anything until the new year, but Dynasty has just been so enjoyable. I just wanted to play games. So me and friend of the show, Dan Mackay, have been playing quite a bit this week, actually. Most nights this week, getting in some games, testing a few sort of like ideas we have, some really fun stuff. I went to an armory. I played Combo Reiner. I wouldn't recommend it. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's just not quite good enough. So that's one. Put that one down for a while. But Berserkers, it's a card. It's definitely breakable. But is it breakable quite yet with the card pool? Probably not quite. But I was trying my darndest. I'll tell you what. I had like potions in my deck. I had like everything. I was trying to like set up this, and I did a couple of times. Like I did. 30, 40 damage turns, but more often than not, I was just dying. So.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you say that, you're like, it's not good enough, you have to add yet into that. Because,
for sure, that card is.
Yeah. We'll get there. Maybe we gotta go, we gotta go in the lab and cook up some magic fairy dust to bring that deck over the line and bring it to the first Pro Tour in 2023. That'd be great. But who knows?
I would love to. Maybe after Outsiders.
Yeah, maybe we just bring Kano again.
Also fine with that decision. I've also been just an off-topic plug spotlight. I've been reading some Brandon Sanderson. Brendan, I know you're a Brandon Sanderson fan. I've been reading Mistborn. I haven't read Mistborn before, so halfway through the first book. So there we go. Bit of an off-topic.
Yeah,
I know we're some fantasy fans.
Oh, there's definitely some Sanderson fans that listen to this podcast, because I remember when I sit on my couch, there's these like Sanderson leather bounds.
Well, you can see Way of the Kings. Looks like you have Way of Kings in the back there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, the leather bounds are from these like limited edition Kickstarters, but I just want to let everybody know that they're actually not mine. They're my partners. People are like mad respect for the leather bound. No, they're not mine. Mistborn is fantastic. There is a series after that, which is
the Elements,
part of like.
Right?
Well, it's
Alloy of Steel was the first book. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the Wax and Wane series, which I didn't like as much, and then there's like the futuristic version, I think. But
Okay.
the original Mistborn are fantastic. I've actually been reading a book as well called Windwalker by Mr. Dan Mackay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he wrote a book. He asked me to pick it up. I've been reading that these past couple weeks.
All right, well, we'll get it on show review next week, and that could decide make or break Dan Mackay's literary career.
Yeah, blow Sanderson out of the water.
All right, let's move on to the news and some massive organized play announcements, Brendan. We talked about it kind of at the start of the show there a little bit. James White, in his infinite wisdom, decided to do the article himself, which is always cool. It's cool when James White jumps on the mothership and writes the article himself for organized play. He talks a bit about organized play in 2022 and how proud he is of that, obviously, and then talks about organized play in 2023. And this commitment to the same OP pathway that we've seen throughout the sort of first year and a half of Flesh and Blood OP, which is this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 view of organized play, doesn't change in 2023. What does change, however, is also another $1 million being committed to organized play in 2023, which is awesome to see, so in line with 2022. But what is changing is some stuff around scheduling, lead times, and seasons. And Brendan, of course, the big one is only one Pro Tour next year, although the prize pool is double that of what we saw for each Pro Tour this year. So it is one Pro Tour, one World Championships. And I just want to talk about these seasons because I think this is and I want to get your view on this, but I think it's a really cool way to give players a better understanding of what to expect from organized play in 2023 without necessarily giving them a calendar to start with, but at least you understand roughly when events are going to be happening, and we know there's going to be some downtime between sets. And also, they've really committed, what James said in this, they're committing to set releases around the time of the start of seasons and at least giving a 2-week gap between the start of a season so people can get cards, things like that, before, even a Battle Hardened happens, things like that. So these are the 3 seasons that LSS have now announced are happening for 2023. The first season is going to run March to June, and this is going to be alongside Outsiders. So we know Outsiders releasing in March, and this is going to be the pinnacle events. They have a pinnacle event for each. This is going to be Pro Tour USA, PT1, and the seasonal programs they're going to run during this first season is Road to Nationals and Skirmish Season 6. So you can probably deduce from this is that we're going to get a Skirmish season, we're then going to get the Pro Tour, and then we're going to have Road to Nationals following that to round out the season off the back of the Pro Tour is what it sounds like. Season 2, July to September, is going to be the next expansion set. So these are now what they're calling the supplemental sets, called expansion sets. This is going to be July to September, so your dynasties, for instance. And this is going to be, the pinnacle event's going to be the national championships. You can safely assume these are probably going to be happening in September, I would say. And you're also going to have Skirmish Season 7, which you would think probably happens before then. And then, so a bit of a lower key season potentially. And then October, January, we'll also have Battle Hardens, of course, throughout these. And then October, January is the next standalone set, another draftable set like we do with Outsiders and Tails, etc. The pinnacle event, World Championships, and the ProQuest season, which you would assume would happen after the World Championships to qualify you for PT1 in 2024. So a real pretty key, clear roadmap there for what organized play looks like in 2023. And Brendan, I'm going to throw it over to you for your thoughts.
I mean, I think the best way to sum it up is it's a step in the right direction. It isn't the final form. I think that dates would still be fantastic as soon as we could get them, because that's the real pain point, right? Is the exact sort of weekend that you're going to have to take off, whether it's for work, how long you're going to be going out, are we going out for the weekend or for the week? Getting the houses, getting the testing team together. Logistically, it's tough, right? And so the more time we have, the better. These sort of like macro, high level views of what the entire season of 2023 will look like. Absolutely step in the right direction, and it's great. I'm super happy to see it, and it's good that I think that they actually heard community feedback. I remember specifically after we had a podcast where we kind of dug into that topic, we actually got feedback that they didn't know that was really a big pain point, and I think that we're already seeing the ramifications of them potentially trying to fix that system and make it a bit better for the player side.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think even in the article, James said they have taken on board as much feedback as possible and tried to understand what the pain points are. And one of those was around burnout and fatigue. And there is a bit more downtime, but also I think tactical downtime. One of the issues I have with like Dynasty is Dynasty releases and then you have downtime. That kind of, and that obviously wasn't the intention. The intention was Dynasty originally was going to come before Worlds, and then you have this. It's a very different landscape, but we're getting ahead of that next year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 PTs, for instance, the following year, because now you have the ProQuest season at the end of 2023 OP, as opposed to, trying to. They've always been running a bit behind, and it looks like this is maybe the first year where they're going to start to get on sort of the timeline of what they want to be. So, I want to ask you, what's your thoughts on 1PT next year?
Yeah, I mean, so traveling to multiple pro tours is because usually they're in different regions. It can be tough, right? It's a lot to ask of some players, but I think that for me, I found the experience last year to be overall very enriching. Getting to travel to Europe, getting to go to New York. Hayden, I know for you it was a little bit tougher. I found it to be a good experience. Do I think it was the best model moving forward? I'm not sure, right? I'm in a pretty strategic location for a lot of these things. Like the United States is really easy. Dallas is like probably one of the best places to live in for that. It's just central to everything. I'm totally cool with it. I'm totally cool with 1PT. I don't have strong thoughts one way or the other, but I know for players in some of these less supported regions, this could be quite refreshing.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of it. It took me sort of a couple of days to think about it, but from a personal standpoint, I'm a big fan of it because I wasn't going to go to more than 1PT next year. My thought process was probably skip the middle PT, go to first PT and Worlds, or skip the first PT depending on where it was, but probably not travel to Europe, for instance. Just so hard to do. But I also think that's been a lot of people's feedback is like, people were saying, it was like PT Lille, Nationals, World Championship was in the space of a couple months. It was so quick. It was a lot of travel. It was a lot of monetary, financial commitments. It's a lot of time commitments. And it just meant that people either couldn't do it, they could do it, they felt like they had to. There was all these feelings around it. I think this expanded season, a PT sort of early in the year, early mid to the year, Worlds sort of late portion of the year, 2 massive events, plus you've got your national championships. We're going to have more callings. They've committed to having callings. And the other thing we didn't talk about is they've got these tiers of callings now, so that they can commit to run callings in smaller regions that, they probably wouldn't want to commit, say, some of these larger prize pools to $20,000, $30,000. They are doing, they're calling the lower tier of callings, which is $10,000 prize pool, and these will be for, I think it's under 400 players, or expected for under 400 players, up to 300.
I love that they're tiering it off of player participation. Sure. Like, I think that's a great way to do it because, I remember there was a calling in Taiwan when Taiwan was virtually impossible to get to for outsiders because of the COVID limitations, and it just. I didn't feel particularly slighted as a player, but it was unfortunate. It was like, okay, here's another $10,000 tournament that is pretty much the same as the one here in Texas or in Indianapolis, where there's like me 500 to 1,000 players. It's like that one is probably objectively easier to win, but I just can't go because I don't live there. And I think that tiering the prizes based off participation makes sense, right? From the publisher side or from the people hosting the tournament, they make more money as more people participate and buy entry into the tournament, and they can increase that prize pool. And the more players in the tournament, the harder it is to win, theoretically. So the prestige and the reward that you will get for winning that tournament goes up. Totally makes sense, and I think it's a great change. Yeah,
so just so if you haven't seen this already, up to 300 players means a $10,000 prize pool, 300 to 600 players is $20,000, and over 600 players is a $30,000 prize pool. So I think this is great. I think, we can see things like a calling in somewhere like Japan or Brazil, where there are these emerging sort of flesh and blood markets, and they can commit it to a lower tier, whereas they can still do, the calling in Indianapolis at I assume a tier 3, the highest tier of calling, or there or thereabouts. Callings alongside Pro Tour 1 and World Championships, those are definitely your highest tier of calling. So yeah, I think this is huge. I think I would like to see more callings in general. I think these allow for regionality, players to, say you're in the US and you get. Just think back to that calling series that we got with Tales of Aria, right? Like that is such a great way to get player base really engaged, involved, and it's not as hard to travel as it is to, say, international events. Obviously, the prize pools are smaller, but if you're in a third tier of calling, these look a lot more appealing. They can pay down a lower, which is what they're talking about. Maybe you're in a region like I am, you get a calling in Australia, you get a calling in Singapore or Hong Kong, and a calling in New Zealand across the year. Cool, I get to go 3 callings in pretty close proximity, and it's not that hard to do compared to traveling to in France or the east coast of the US for Pro Tours.
Yeah, that calling circuit in the United States was when, like, as a player, I felt the most at like that I was playing like a pro circuit, right? Like I had the opportunity to kind of.
That's because you played
almost every. Yeah, exactly. Almost every weekend to be in at these big tournaments that were genuinely hard to win. They had prestige, and a lot of people were showing up, and it was an awesome experience. I do want to drill down into one thing that was mentioned in the article, and you said it as well, which is fatigue, right? They mentioned that they got feedback on player fatigue. I think this is a really interesting issue, actually, because fatigue it's kind of a finicky thing to deal with, right? Because if they just had more callings, like people that are mentioning that they're getting fatigued, I think those are the people that are feeling compelled to go to these tournaments and they don't really want to anymore. So the incentivization is pushing them to play tournaments that they don't want to. I do think that maybe more callings is better than less, but at the same time, I don't think that if we talk about content, we talk about tournaments, having a calling season, having a pro tour, and then filling this gap with like another skirmish season that happens to like kind of overlap with Road to Nationals is like right after. Yeah, as a pro player and as a person that's like playing the game more, I'm probably not going to care about the skirmish season. I'm probably going to take it off, and that would sort of exemplify my definition of like me getting fatigued in Flesh and Blood. It's like, yeah, I don't really care about this Road to National season or the skirmish season lower level events, but I do think that more higher level events like callings would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It depends. I think it's going to be an individual basis which events you feel compelled to want to play at. And I think there's this kind of thing, I think, with the early in a game, like Flesh and Blood, where it's like you feel compelled to go to these events because it's like, say you do well in the first event. It's like, well, to keep my elo, to keep my name out there, I need to keep going to these events. I feel like there's this buy-in, I need to be there. I think that starts to dissipate as the player base grows and the game shows its maturity and where the game's going to go, I hope. But also at the same time, when I say more callings, I think what it can do is give opportunities to have callings in places that we wouldn't last year or the year before. Like I said, like a Brazil or Japan, for instance, things like that. That's what I hope to see out of more potential callings. But yeah, Battle Hardens, they've already said as well in this that there will be, there's going to be Battle Hardens in places like this. And it's so interesting because I never play Battle Hardens. I don't enjoy them.
Well, the main reason why they're unenjoyable, Hayden, is actually because of the structure. So many people show up. I don't know I feel like it kind of is breaking their system. They've adjusted it a bit with 2-day stuff, but the way it used to be, it was like you would show up to a Battle Hardened, and it sort of lost. It didn't. The integrity suffered because you would lose one round and be knocked out. And it was like, that doesn't really feel like a real tournament. And so like, yeah, so that was the biggest issue with Battle Hardens in my opinion, and why I actually opted to not play them sometimes before in the past.
Such a grind. I've not played a Battle Hardened this year, and I've had the opportunity to play, I think, 4 of them. I just, I haven't made a Sunday at a Pro Tour. I haven't made a top 8. So it's like, I've had the ability to play them each. I guess I played the Dev Challenge at Worlds, but yeah, I'm gonna avoid this. All right, I think we need to move on. But there's some exciting stuff happening with OP. James has said that we're gonna get more dates in January for season 1. Prior to season 1, though, we do have some events that are already in the books and are happening. So this is the Calling Indianapolis and the Calling Auckland. These are both prior to the start of season 1, prior to the release of Outsiders. That's exciting to see. So that is 3rd to 5th February in Indianapolis and February 24th to 26th in Auckland, New Zealand. And then as well, we do have a series of Battle Hardens that are happening. I'm just going to run through these really quickly. Leeds and New Jersey are 13th to 15th of January. 27th to 29th of January is Belgium. February 11th to 12th is Bologna in Italy. And 3rd to 5th of March is Charlotte in the United States. So there's somewhere, if you're somewhere in the world, you can, I presumably, probably access some form of Battle Hardens or calling over the next 3 months, if you really, really, really want to, which is cool. That's a good start. And then we, of course, head into season 1 with more details to come. I'm sure we'll be talking more about that as we go. Of course, Outsiders also releasing March 24th, pre-release weekend, March 27th. We haven't heard anything about world premieres for this event. Maybe that doesn't happen this time around with the coinciding of season 1, but we'll see. World Championship vlog is up, Brendan. I know you got to see the little Easter egg at the end, the Dante Delfico Easter egg. Please go and check out the video. Let us know what you think of it. We had a lot of effort put into this one, and we're going to try and do this again. We're all feedback welcome of how you'd love to see these vlogs go. Next time, we're probably going to have some sort of like testing environment as well, like in person, which we didn't get to do for Worlds because of the timeline, which would be great as well. So you go check that out. Drop us a like, drop us a comment, whatever you want to do. MetalFab tokens, the Arsenal Pass collab token is still available up on metalfabtokens.com. And just want to shout out, me and Brendan are both working on some content for December, Jan. We got some stuff coming your way. I'm in the midst of making a Kano video. I know people want to see that. The Dash Deck Tech. We've got some more CC focused content before ProQuest season kicks off on Jan 15th. Brendan, anything else to add to the news before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what you all are used to in terms of Arsenal Pass content leading into competitive seasons like ProQuest, Road to Nationals, or calling seasons. Just going to be having some guests on, likely to do some deck techs, have an additional piece on Patreon if you're looking for the sideboard guide and maybe some extra tips and tricks that don't make it into the video. If you're interested in seeing like some particular players, go ahead and shout them out in the comments. That actually helps us a lot.
Please.
Who you all interested in hearing from. Because we would love to have them on, especially people that are specialists in some sort of hero that, really, really have, put the time in. Would love to have them join us on Arsenal Pass and potentially do something like a deck tech for this upcoming ProQuest season.
100%. Yeah, let us know who you'd love to see. We can get some returning favorites, maybe some new blood in there. There's so many amazing players out there that we could invite on. And if they want to come on, great. Maybe they don't want to. We'll see. All right, Brendan, Commander Cookout time. Fire up the Barbie, all that jazz. We haven't done that in a while, so we'll come back with that in the new year with some heat. Shorter question this week coming from Zach. Zach in the Arsenal Pass Patreon Discord. Shout out to Zach because he smashed post fitness challenge. He kind of carried on with the Arsenal Pass fitness challenge, and I think he lost like an incredible amount of weight. Right, Brendan? He just committed to like this kind of like workout routine, calorie counting, and a healthier lifestyle, and he said it was balanced, and he's just been smashing it. So I haven't seen him. He's actually here in Australia, but he's in a different state. I haven't seen him since kind of the kind of end of the fitness challenge and his kind of journey. So I'm excited to see him probably at a ProQuest maybe in the new year. Anyway, Zach has a question. Let's get to that. Have you ever tried Flesh and Blood's more casual formats like UPF? We've been playing a little bit more at before Armories lately, and it's been surprisingly fun experience. Brendan, I don't know if you've played any, so I might just start with my experience so far and maybe just get your kind of thoughts overall on what you think about these casual formats. But I have had the opportunity to play a couple of UPF games. When I was in Singapore for the calling, prior to Lille, I got to hang out with Lost in Space and some of the Singapore community, and we played some UPF. That was awesome. I played a janky ass. I tried to play Combo Rhino on that as well, actually. But this janky Combo Rhino deck with a bunch of potions and crazy brews and stuff. And I had such fun. Like, yes, it is definitely a casual format. I think trying to make it into a competitive format, like we've seen at some of these events for like winner book, Welcome to Wraith book or whatever at Pro Tour side events and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe that's cool and people want to see that stuff. I'm not sure like how enjoyable that is if you're playing just purely to just like win and win and win, because it is quite a what's the word? It's a political game. Yeah, it's very political, right? It's like playing, like some of these other political based games that you might like, mini games you might play with friends. So there is that aspect to it. But I had a lot of fun. Like there's so many cool things you can do, and the multiplayer environment leads to people play Valder, and there's all these like, the different ways to play the game that you might not experience with 1v1 gameplay. What it does lead me to think is like I can't wait for PvE. I think PvE is going to just be like a game changer for the casual side of Flesh and Blood. I'm not sure UPF is the mainstay format for the more grassroots, more kitchen table side of Flesh and Blood. I feel like that, depending on how PvE is done.
I think it's Blitz.
Oh, you think it's Blitz? I think it's PvE, but...
Yeah, I think it's Blitz. PvE, yeah. I mean, we haven't seen it yet.
Exactly, that's the tough thing.
It could be great. And we've seen, heroes that look like they'll slot right into that kind of format. Exactly. Yeah, I think right now Blitz is sort of the tabletop format of Flesh and Blood. I have a lot of hopes for UPF just because of what Commander has done for Magic the Gathering. I would love for that to happen in Flesh and Blood. Mm-hmm. It's great for the game. I did play UPF. I've played it a few times back when it was like first ideated, which it was janky back then. I think it had a bit of a different set of rules, and obviously a much smaller card pool. I think this was in Crucible of War. Yep. So I played it a bit. For me, I do struggle to enjoy those formats because I have, I'm working on it as I get older and get in my years. But I just have a lot of trouble waiting for my turn. I sit there and my brain just starts to implode as I'm just like sitting there and sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. So I think if you're playing with the right group of people and it's something you're doing as like as it's additional to the social aspect, right? You're just hanging out. Yeah, it can be fun. But for me, like as like a way to play Flesh and Blood, one day I'll get there. I think one day once I I learn a little bit more patience. But yeah, I think that for me, like right now, UPF is cool. It's great. I saw some people playing the York UPF thing back in San Jose, which looked really fun. But ultimately, probably not the format for me. And I do think that it's it's not quite the kitchen table format of Flesh and Blood. Although I hope it does become that at one point, because I think that Commander is a great aspect of Magic.
Yeah, something about, like, if I compare it to some of, say, Magic and Commander, and that is like the premier. I mean, it's become the premier format of Magic the Gathering, but it's the premier multiplayer format and casual to semi-casual format. What that brings is a different kind of, I don't know, there's a sense of, I guess maybe the card pool is so much bigger, there's so much more you can do, and the way that commanders work. Yeah, whereas it is a bit like Flesh and Blood feels a little bit shoehorned into UPF in a way. It doesn't feel quite perfect, doesn't feel quite right. And I think there's so much opportunity for that to change as we go through. But again, I just keep coming back to PvE, because I think that there's this opportunity for PvE to be an amazing way to play Flesh and Blood with friends, with strangers, at your local game store. I think there's so much opportunity. You can do some really cool things with, like monthly challenges at your armories, where there's a certain, like, maybe like hero or like a villain that's, enemy that's there, or environment. There's so many different things you can do. So yes, UPF played it, think it's at least enjoyable, and I can see why some people find it really, really enjoyable, and there's something there. Long term, I'm more excited about, like, PvE, for instance. I don't know if you've ever played these, Brennan, but these like cooperative kind of board games where, I get more involved in that, because I get to watch what, like, the person to my left is doing, and I'm more invested in it because I'm actually interested in, like, them making the right plays in order for us to beat the game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any of those things, those prerequisites called friends, to play with.
True.
Honestly, I don't. I'm not even joking. So I haven't played them. But yeah, they do look potentially fun. There was a PvE in Flesh and Blood, just for like a little snippet here. Yeah, there was this like car. You would like beat up this car or something in the first Auckland calling back in 2020. And I think it was Alan. It was
Alan and Ian from Reflex Radio. I think, yeah.
Exactly. So they had like this like sort of PvE game, and the person that won actually got the spoiler for Voltic Bolt, which was actually the first spoiler for Wizard for Arcane Rising.
Yep, very cool. All right, thanks for the questions, Zach. If you want to get your Command Cookout questions in, you can drop them in the comments below on YouTube, tweet at us, email them to arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. Just whatever you want to do, get a sign writing plane and put it in the sky above Dallas, Texas. I don't know, just whatever's going. Main topic of the pod. Let's move on, Brendan. We're talking about this Dynasty Classic Constructed Meta, which is really starting to shape up. Now we've had, just to kind of, basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through the events we've had so far, talk about how this meta has started to evolve, talk about the decks that we're seeing, and then discuss a little bit about where we think this meta is going to go as we head to ProQuest season. Because as we say, there's basically, outside of local events that you might have, maybe, a store in California is running a 1K or something like that. There's no BAB tier 2 events happening between now and start of ProQuest season. So now's the time to discuss what we've seen so far. So we're going to go through what we've seen so far, which includes the Philadelphia Battle Hardened and PTI event. We've also had the PTI event in Hong Kong, which was attached to a Blitz Battle Hardened, which happened end of November. And then just last weekend, we had Singapore, where we had a PTI and a Battle Hardened event. So we have 5 tier 2 events to talk about and some really interesting metagames to break down, Brendan. So let's just get straight into it and talk about Philadelphia, which happened first. This is kind of where we saw Dynasty. This is where we saw Dynasty for the first time. This is where it all kind of unfolded. I think this was, I want to say this is the weekend of release, right? So, very, very start of Dynasty. And to talk about this event, we had Battle Hardened on the Saturday, which saw a pretty interesting top 8. We saw 3 dash. This is kind of the start of like this dash discussion in this new Dynasty format. 3 dash, 2 Dromai, 2 Icelander, and a Bravo in the top 8, with a dash ultimately taking it out. I think it might have been a mirror match in the finals, even a dash mirror match in the finals. And then the PTI event the next day, where we saw 3 Fis, so a very different sort of top 8, Ultim, Icelander, dash, Bravo, and a Katsu, so very different. And Icelander won that. Brody Spurlock on Icelander won that event. I think it was Icelander versus top 4 was Dash, Icelander, Ultim, Katsu. I don't know what the final looked like. I know Katsu was playing Ultim. I think Michael Feng was playing Ultim. Not sure if he made the final. There was a cool Katsu deck that Pat HQ was playing. Like, I think it was a Tiger Katsu deck. We haven't really seen much of that since then. But yeah, kind of the start of the season, interesting 2 days apart, a day apart even, you see Dash go from like completely dominating, no Fi in the top 8, all of a sudden there's Fi back in the top 8 and there's only one Dash. So you weren't at that event, were you?
No, but if I was going to weave like a narrative around this, I think that Dash going into, as soon as Dynasty comes out, people look at some of the new cards for Dash. There's a shiny object in the form of Nitro Mechanoid, but probably ultimately not the direction you're going to be going. But we saw cards like Pulse Wave Harpoon come in, as well as some non-attack action buff. Exactly. So very, very strong cards come in for a deck that was already quite powerful, but its biggest downside being fatigue. And then we see a card in the form of Hanabi Blaster that drastically mitigates that potential strategy winning against you. So I think Dash was not surprising to see it at least show up. The amount of success it got was surprising, right? Because those decks, while they were using decks from the past as inspiration, I mean, they were still kind of fundamentally new. And, if it's winning tournaments sort of day one, effectively, it just shows how powerful that deck potentially is once it does get refined. Nevertheless, when I look at something like Dash, I would identify it as an aggro deck, right? It could be a bit transformative and mid-range or something like that, but ultimately an aggro deck, especially with things like Hanabi Blaster. And in Flesh and Blood, the way it tends to work is when there's a dominant aggro deck or a set of quote-unquote dominant aggro decks, which is kind of a fallacy. It's more like there's just one, right? You pick the aggro deck. You pick the best aggro deck because there's almost no reason to be playing the second best aggro deck. You just always divert to the best. And I think that's what Fi is. So people saw that Dash was seeing a lot of success. Maybe Dash was hating things out of the format, and then they swap over to Fi, right? Which might be more premier.
Well, I think as well, the Dash decks you saw on the first weekend at Battle Hardened Philly, they both were playing pistol plans. So the player that came second did have Hanabi Blaster in the deck, but fundamentally they're both playing hybrid, a boost aggro that had access to items, like pistol items in the sideboard. Both of them are playing pretty traditional decks, similar to what you saw Christian Hawk top 8 Pro Tour Leo with, like effectively with a couple of Pulse Wave Harpoon plugged in. I think some of them played BIOS update, and then there was a Hanabi Blaster and what looked like a sideboard for the player that came second. But I agree, Fi into those builds traditionally just too fast, right? Just a faster aggro deck. So, like you say, the success of Fi, and then of course Icelander. We just know how powerful that deck is, and I think Icelander can always win an event, right? And
Brody Spurlock at a Battle Hardened too is like it's so funny when you started off, you were talking about Brody Spurlock and Michael Fang at Battle Hardens, and that is just such a
the name's synonymous with
cliche. A cliche at this point. It's like Brody Spurlock and Michael Fang top 8ing or winning Battle Hardens across the United States. Like they just travel like two peas in a pod, and they're always top 8ing these things. But
so funny.
Michael always playing Oldhim, even though he says it sucks constantly, and Brody Spurlock playing either Briar or Icelander.
Yeah, traditionally Briar, but swapped to Icelander for this event. So, right, so that was the first weekend of events. We saw, breakout weekends for Dash, Fi not going anywhere, Icelander still putting up results. Very little Ultim though. So across the two top 8s, only one Ultim. Bravo actually putting up two spots in the top 8, whereas Ultim, just the one. Then we moved to Hong Kong, which happened 2 weeks later, and we have on the Saturday, there's a Battle Hardened, which is a Blitz event. I think that was won by Dash. I think it was a Dash Rhinar final, maybe even. And then you head to this PTI event on the Sunday. And I actually have the metagame breakdown for the PTI event. So the most played deck at the PTI event was Icelander, 6 copies of Icelander in the event. Dash, 5 copies, and then I think Ultim Lexi, and there's a lot of decks that have two copies. In the end, the top 8 looks like this. You have 3 Dash players in the top 8, an Icelander, Dromai, a Briar, a Rhinar, and a Fi. So a pretty diverse top 8, but again, dominated by Dash, and in the end, an all-Dash final. A really cool Mechanoid focused deck versus a more traditional hybrid pistol deck, where the hybrid pistol deck ends up winning. But this Mechanoid deck, I watched there was some coverage of this, and just like plays against Briar, just blocks, Mechanoid, high octane, bang, just like, like semi-combo Mechanoid deck, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I sat on the other side of that during one of our Blitz, or like when we were filming some of those Blitz videos. I think it was one of the ones that we weren't able to upload because there was like corruption or something like that. But yeah, I've sat across from that combo. It's pretty powerful once it comes off, but the stars do need to align a bit. I do want to sort of magnify in on this dichotomy between between Oldhim and Bravo, because Bravo making it into these top 8s or even showing up is really interesting to me, because I actually think that Bravo is just I think it's objectively worse than Oldhim in almost every single way. I think Bravo's hero text ability is effectively blank. There's almost no excuse to ever be activating it unless you're already winning. And Oldhim's on the other side of that, on the flip side of that coin, is so powerful. So if you're playing Bravo, you have to ask yourself, like, is Crippling Crush and is things like Showtime, are they worth it? I think ultimately, absolutely not, when Oldhim has access to Crown of Seeds and is usually playing pretty much the exact same cards that Bravo's playing, but just in a much more efficient manner. So I think Bravo shows up because people think about a way to counter Find, to counter aggro decks, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to dominate disruptive effects. But I would rather be playing Oldhim and be playing disruptive effects by using my Tunic and pitching 1 card and then doing 2 card 8 or 2 card 10, because that's what Oldhim does, right? Or Command & Conquer pummel off my Tunic. So yeah, there's this, we consistently have seen this since the last Battle Hardened season before Worlds. It's like Bravo and Oldhim showing up. I do think that we will ultimately trend into like mostly Oldhim.
Sounds like you're speaking from experience there.
Yeah. Because Michael Feng, he was here in Texas, and he goes, "Why would you play Bravo over Oldhim?" Because you look at the deck list, they're not that different. I'm like, there's not a great reason. There really isn't.
Let me ask you a question. You sit down as Fi. Would you rather play against Oldhim or Bravo?
I think he would 100% rather play against Bravo. Like Bravo, because like you think that like, okay, I'm gonna dominate this card, but I don't think that's extremely effective. And like when you dominate something like Crippling Crush,
don't worry about Crippling Crush. Crush the weak.
Yeah, not Crippling Crush. Crush the weak, right? That's the most important. So the Crush the weak, dominate, it's really expensive. Fi does have a little bit of armor to kind of deal with that, and you don't have a massive like set of turns to be doing that multiple times in a game. So I would just much rather be using my freaking my Ice Shield, which is very powerful, or in my Crown of Seeds, and then my ultimate ability to ice back things on top of the deck. Like, I feel like it really outclasses Bravo against Fi.
Yeah, I think we were gonna. I had this in the notes to talk about later, but we're here now, so we should definitely just kind of round it out, because you've kind of said all the things that I think are there to be said. But I will say that I do think if you're trying to target very specific decks, I think, for instance, you can make Bravo have a better Fi matchup than Ultim, because you can play these 3-card hands that dominate, Crush the Weaks, and I always forget the other one. The one that comes in for 8 and stops.
Choke Slam.
Yeah, Choke Slam. Like, I think you can build these decks, and you can have a better deck into them than Ultim. But I agree. Generally, the spread is going to be better. The turn-to-turn things that you're trying to do as a Guardian, Ultim is generally going to do that better. You have access to, Stalagmite, which I think is just a crazy good card. Crown of Seeds, crazy good, especially when you pair it with the other shield, which you can play into other matchups. So Ultim has all these tools that Bravo doesn't. But Bravo does have some tools and some play patterns and ways to build specifically that Ultim doesn't necessarily. Yeah. So
I think Bravo's play patterns and tools are a bit clearer, right? Like, I think that it's very much like
more linear.
I think it's on the nose, right? It's like dominate this, disrupt them, and take away their ability to have go again or gain power, stuff like that. Where Oldhim is just more of like, okay, my deck can gain significantly more value than something like a Bravo, right? Because my hero ability is more powerful, my shield is freaking amazing, and then I have this broken piece of legendary head equipment.
Yep. So yeah, Brendan thinks no reason to play Bravo. I think some reason to play Bravo, but I generally kind of agree with what you're saying. Interestingly, in this top 8, come back to Hong Kong for the PTI event, no Guardian whatsoever out of the 5 Guardian decks. So I mean, Guardian was only about 10% in the meta, but not making it into the top 8 at all. Icelander, most played deck, only puts one player into the top 8 in the end. Dash, which was the second most played, 60% of the players make it into top 8. So pretty huge conversion rate there. Obviously, in 2 of them in the final, one ends up winning.
Yeah,
and we see the first sort of spot for Briar come back into top 8. And again, Dromai had 2 top 8s in Philadelphia, sort of that 2 weekends before, and another top 8 here. So those are kind of the narratives I think you start to see coming out of Hong Kong. And then we move on to Singapore this past weekend, where we had 2 events again. We had a Battle Hardened and a PTI. So the Battle Hardened, again, I've got the thanks to, I don't know who posted this, but I saw it on Twitter, so I can't give direct credit to who posted this, but thank you to, if you do know who it was, please post it in the comments. But they put up the full meta breakdown. It might have been JYQ on Twitter, who's an event organizer in Singapore, actually. But so we head to Battle Hardened. Hong Kong. Most played deck, Brendan. Yeah, you guessed it, Rhinar, obviously. Rhinar is the most played deck at the Battle Hardened in Hong Kong on the Saturday, followed by...
It's close, though. It's close.
It's equal with Bravo. It's actually equal with Bravo,
Yeah.
And then
so 2 things that are a bit surprising, but yeah. I mean,
Rhinar.
It's definitely close with the rest of the meta. We got a lot of other,
For sure.
fives. Icelander 5 here.
Rhinar, Bravo, top played, and then Icelander is the second most played, or Fire and Icelander are the equal second most played. And then you go into, there's a good representation of Dash, Lexi, Viserai, Briar, Dromite, Kano, even 3 copies of Kano. So there's an even kind of spread of decks around that kind of second. So a real diversity to the metagame. And then you see the top 8, 2 Bravo. So Brendan, clearly you're wrong. 2 Lexi in there. No Ultim, you'll note though, no Ultim in this top 8, although there was only 1 player playing Ultim. Again, defaulting to Bravo for whatever reason, like you say, is that the correct decision? But 2 Bravo, 2 Lexi, a Kano, a Rhinar, a Dorinthia, and a Briar. So again, a pretty diverse top 8 there.
Yeah, and I think if you really want to read between the lines of some of this data, and like a deck that I'm particularly interested in, which is Icelander, it's like Icelander has terrible conversion rates, and it has been having that since Michael Hamilton took that deck to win the U.S. National Championship. It's why it fell off. Like, it was less popular going into the World Championship. It's like people were not ignorant of that deck. They knew about it. They picked it up. They tried it, and they did not have success with it. And we see that happening again. That deck, I guess it's just a bit harder to sort of convert with or to pick up, or maybe it has a bit of a higher skill floor, right? Takes a bit to sort of gain a basic proficiency with it. But yeah, we consistently see Icelander show up in force and then not convert well at all.
Icelander it's this deck where you have so much agency, like whether you think agency is the thing in this game, whatever, but you do. You have a lot of decisions to make. You have a lot of things you can impact your opponent because of cards like Hypothermia, Channel like Frigid, Frostbites. There's sequencing decisions to be made almost every single turn. There is always correct plays and there's always incorrect plays. But with Icelander, those are a lot more difficult to identify, I think, and there's a lot of points that you can make the incorrect play as opposed to the correct play, and that is really punishing as a deck. To what level that is, where you get to it, I'm sure there's a point where you get to a threshold of, say there's 12 misplays in a game, right? And you get to the point where you stop making 8 of those. Is that enough? Maybe that's enough to make Icelander the correct choice, right? But there's so many decisions to make, and a couple of wrong missteps with Icelander can just derail your game. It is not the easiest hero to play, that's for sure.
It's interesting. Like, I have a theory, kind of a working theory on Icelander, is that a lot of people play the deck incorrectly from like a macro perspective, right? Like, they fundamentally play the deck like wrong, right? They're not valuing the attack actions correctly and not valuing when to defend, when to attack, when to place disruption, like when to take damage to place a Channel like Frigid, when to, give the Frostbite to try to disrupt the opponent's turn, all this kind of stuff. And they might play the deck too aggressively, too defensively, and, not use the Insidious Chill setups correctly, etc., etc. And the deck feels like ass if you do that. Like, it does not feel good, because you will especially just get rolled by aggro decks. Like, it feels, you look at Icelander's package and you're like, oh, this is tailored to beat aggressive decks like Fi. It's very disruptive. No, like these belittle Fi decks, they will just run over you, and you actually exist on a very thin margin against them. It's just that I think a lot of the wins look a bit convincing sometimes, but I think that the matchup is quite close, and like your margin for error as the Icelander deck is very, very small.
Yep, agree. So kind of the takeaway from that Saturday event, 2 Lexi in the top 8. Lexi ends up winning that event, beating 3 Bravo, beating 3 Guardians on the way to doing so. I think 2 in the top 8, 1 in Swiss. Don't know what the deck list looked like, haven't seen it yet, but I know it was more of an Ice Lexi based build, obviously with some sort of sideboard plan, probably using some of these new cards like Drill Shot. Card's pretty good. But to be honest, my kind of takeaway from that is great meta call if you're expecting a bunch of dash and aggressive dash and aggressive Fi decks. And traditionally, this is in Singapore, very aggressive meta. So I think Lexi, a pretty great call, and ends up sort of reaping the benefits. I think as well that's why people chose to play Bravo. Just like you said, point A to point B, best way to disrupt an aggro deck. I'm going to pick up this Bravo deck and play it for right or wrong, right? I think that's kind of what we see happen. So that's the breakdown there. We head to the Sunday event, PTI event, again in Singapore, and this looks like, so the diversification, again, really widespread hero pool. And I think you see this at Battle Hardens, you see this at Callings, right? You see a lot more diversification at these open events as opposed to closed events like a PT, etc. But again, interestingly, Kano is the second most played deck in this. Yeah, it's like Rhinar again, the most played deck, and then it's like equal with Viserai, Kano, Dash. So probably the same people showing up, right? And
yeah, that's Singapore too. Like the players in Singapore have, I mean, almost since the inception of Flesh and Blood in that region, have favored wizard decks. We see no Icelanders in this day 2 event.
They all went home.
Yeah, they all went home. But the Kano players, and this is very akin to most people that do play that deck. There's 3 Kano players in the previous day's event, and now there's 3 Kano players in this event because people who play that deck tend to, be a bit stubborn, I think.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, another Kano in the top 8 here as well. Chuhing made top 8 both days with Kano. Chuhing probably, if not the best player in Singapore, one of the best, if not one of the best in the world, to be honest. If you want to check out a small interview we did with him on the Worlds vlog, you can see that, meet who Chuhing is. 2 Fire, 2 Ultim, Alexi, a Kano, Olivia, and the eventual winner, a Rhinar, also in the top 8, Brendan. So really interesting. Obviously, we see no Ultim the day before, and all of a sudden we've got 2 Ultim back in the top 8. So again, a real flip on its head of what happened the day before. I don't know if people thought, wow, bunch of Lexi, bunch of Bravo. I'm playing Ultim today. Obviously, whether they did think that or not, Ultim did well. Fire coming back. And then, yeah, of course, another Lexi, Kano, there's Olivia, but this Rhinar ends up winning it. I mean, if you dodge the fires, it's a pretty good top 8 for Rhinar. So, I'm not super surprised.
Yeah, Rhinar's been taking names recently. Even before Dynasty. But I mean, one of my sort of bigger takeaways from the data from Singapore and Hong Kong specifically is like their battle hardens are a bit small in terms of participation, looks like. And I think that's why we get such a big spread in terms of like what decks are top 8ing and kind of like what shows up. You saw, no Icelander on the second day's tournament, which maybe makes sense in the context of like none of them converted, but probably doesn't make sense in the sense of like, it's probably one of the top three most powerful and most played decks in the current meta.
Yeah, well, let's get on to talking about, I guess, the kind of overall picture. I mean, I do want to say, so I think it's 70 players at the Battle Hardened. PTI event has a bit less on the second day. But the other thing I want to point about Rhinar is that we've had 3 pretty big Rhinar wins in the last couple of months. We had Chandler, of course, winning the calling. We had the Malaysian national champion. We've now had Rhinar win this Battle Hardened. All 3 of those players are like Rhinar mains, like stands, like Rhinar stands. I just want to point that out. It's so funny that like those are the players who come through and when it's like these people, they're so dedicated to Rhinar and they get their rewards. So let's look back. What's the overall meta picture heading out of these 3 Battle Hardened weekends? Well, Dash ends up with the most top 8s, and then Fi. So 7 top 8s for Dash, 6 for Fi, and then it's actually a tie between Bravo and Icelander for the next most top 8s. And then Ultim, Lexi, Dramai, Rhinar round out with 3 top 8s each. Really interesting. No Arachne in there. You see Briar has 2 top 8s, but doesn't really make much of a dent in there. What else do we see in there? Lexi's really interesting. Just quite an interesting spread of like top 8 results. Nothing too dominating apart from Dash and Fi. Starts to shape us up of what the meta is kind of looking like in terms of wins. 2 Dash wins, an Icelander win, a Lexi win, and a Rhinar win. Again, quite a diverse wins there for these Battle Hardened and PTI events.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, no Arachne showing up, which is interesting as it's the new class and hero.
I mean, it showed
Dynasty.
up. It just didn't do well.
Well, yeah, showing up in terms of like putting up big performances, and I think it speaks to the deck's potential power level, right? And might be indicative of what we should expect for ProQuest season, unless somebody is able to sort of at least relatively reinvent the current deck list that exists out there. It does need to see a bit of change and innovation if it's gonna be a real threat in the meta.
Yep. Before we talk about kind of the decks to be and what this meta is shaping up to look like in our eyes, the one thing I want to point out is no Viserai represented in these top 8s at all, despite showing up in some reasonable numbers. That's probably the one that's the most surprising. You'd probably expect to see maybe 1 or 2 Viserai in there. The deck hasn't changed much. There's still this Mauve Shrill package. You can get now access to Looming Doom to help you against potential fatigue matchup in Ultim. Really interesting to not see it. I think still good, but maybe people are focused on other aggro decks. Dash can potentially be a pretty tough matchup for you. Fi as well, so maybe it's just not viable in a pretty aggressive meta that we've started to see. We've seen at the start of this meta at least.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the best, right, or the best of the rest as you have on here, because I don't know. I would like to start off with talking a little bit about Briar. Briar is just criminally underappreciated in the previous meta, and now probably criminally underappreciated again. We see Fi coming out potentially as a response to Dash, right, as maybe being the more premier aggro deck, but I think Briar's right there in contention. You saw Briar see success at the World Championship, fulfilling that exact same role, right? Competing with Fi as just a beatdown aggro deck and just trying to be faster. And we saw the power of that actually on stream with Chris Sayali, I believe. Basically getting close to drawing his entire deck on stream.
Yeah, exactly. So you have this. The other thing is Dromai, right? Like Dromai is something that we didn't see at the World Championship, but is like we saw it at events prior to that. We saw it at Callings. And then we now see that it's starting to put up some results. Dromai is real. Like, that is one thing I think is like, people go, well, you can't beat aggro decks, so why would you play Dromai? I mean, look, we saw Diamamata take down Tarek Patel and Fi in an online event. So I'm just saying.
So it did top 8. It did top 8 worlds, remember? So it did have one.
Oh, sorry, it did too. The player from Italy, right?
Yeah, the guy who's the... sorry, I forget his name.
Omar.
I think it's Fab. Yeah, Omar Fab, maybe?
Yeah,
he's the new yellow hat of Flab, because he had the special hat. But yeah, we had one Dromai in the top 8, which was very surprising at the World Championships. But Dromai is a deck that I think the deck list has seen a lot of evolution actually since its inception, and the list has adapted quite a bit to where it's actually able to beat some of these aggro decks. So that's like the biggest question you have with Dromai is like, you can't just have a Dromai list that preys on freaking Oldhim or like slower decks, because they don't really exist. You have to have a Dromai deck that beats these aggro decks if you're going to compete.
Yep. Yeah, at least be able to compete, like you say. Like, it can't just immediately fold. It has to be able to win, 4 out of 10 games or something to be viable, I think. So that is what we've seen. So let's talk about it. Where do you see, what are the best decks right now? Like, in my eyes, it's Dash is the deck to beat, right? It's Dash and Fi. And I still think Icelander is one of the most powerful things, but it is this thing to harness, right? It's something that is maybe tougher to play. People have walked away from it to try other things in the meantime. It's still really powerful. It's still putting up some results. If I was to look at, we don't really talk about tiers, I guess, because it's interchangeable. It depends on the build, it depends on the meta. But I think the 3 most generically powerful decks right now, and the decks that people are going to look to, are Dash, Fi, and Icelander in this upcoming ProQuest season to start with, at least.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that there's a bit of a distinction between like actual, like, I don't know, realized power level and potential power level, because I think the Icelander mostly exists in like potential power level, where, like, as we see it consistently from the results, it just falls short. I don't know what it is about that deck where it seems to only be able to convert in like a select number of players' hands. But I would put, I totally agree with you with like the Dash Fi. I probably put things like Briar up there as well. Like, I just think that people have strayed away from that deck as it's maybe gotten a bit stale, a little bit boring, I guess. And, you have other aggro decks to choose from that are a bit more exciting, maybe. I just think it's fundamentally powerful, and people underappreciate that deck a lot. I would put Icelander probably below that tier, just because not a lot, like, we just don't see it convert. But if I was looking to play ProQuest and I wasn't trying to roleplay as a Kano player, I would definitely be looking at Icelander as my number 1 pick after that, and then be looking at Dash. If my Icelander deck can't beat the Dash Infestation or Fi Infestation, then I'll switch. But for me and the playstyle that I enjoy, if I'm not playing Kano, Icelander's probably my number 1 pick. You gotta caveat it out, right? Because the Kano pick is not 100% logical, and it's definitely not logical in the context of like a ProQuest season.
I'm going to talk more broadly, like just as how I would approach this as just a player looking at kind of these results and how I want to look at the meta and just the power level of decks out there. I think to me it is Dash, Fi. Kind of agree with you on Icelander. I think Briar, like, you just have the 3 best aggro decks, right? And that kind of tier 1 of yours. I might have Briar a step down because I think it is tougher into Fi, and I don't even think the Dash matchup is particularly that amazing for you either. The next one I think is Dromai for me. Like, I think that is a real deck, and that is kind of sitting in that tier 2-ish kind of region for me. Then there's like this Guardian debate, which we've just had. It's probably Ultim, right? Ultim feels like the Guardian deck that sits in that place that looks to police at least some of these aggro decks be the disruptive element, be this kind of big hitting deck that's in there. It feels like Guardian maybe has kind of lost its identity a little bit at the start of the season and what it wants to exactly do. You know, we saw this in Nationals, even into Worlds season, where it's like, you know, you've got people playing like Red Glacial Footsteps and Pummels and more practical decks, and then there's still these more traditional Ultim decks. And it's like, what is Ultim's kind of identity? And I think that is the toughest thing, is that I think on any given day with, you know, if you know exactly what the meta is going to do, you can build an Ultim deck to beat the field. But it's really hard when you have to metagame and have to choose what cards to play and what cards not to play and which sort of axes you want your Ultim deck to operate on. I think that's the challenge of Ultim.
I think Ultim generally played as a value deck nowadays. It's not really built as a fatigue deck, and I think that in the hands of the right player, I think that Iyslander is a better value deck.
Does seem that way.
Yep, because I look at those current builds of Ultims and how they utilize their Fendel Spring Tunic and their 4 costs or their Pummels plus 2 costs, and it does seem like it's completely based around just trying to outvalue the opponent, and I think that Iyslander is just a better version of that deck right now, but Ultim is a totally legitimate pick as well if that's like the playstyle you would prefer.
Yeah, I think it's a playstyle thing. Like, the weapon is still very strong, and Pummel CNC. If you hit 2 or 3 Pummel CNCs in a game, you're like, that is going to win you games.
who hits 3 Pummel CNCs in a game? Jesus Christ!
Dan, every time we test, I tell you what, every single time. Anyway, and then I think there's this group of medicals, which is Lexi. We saw Lexi win at Battle Hardened plus put up results. I think a really interesting medical for the start of the ProQuest season. If you're expecting a lot of aggressive decks at this kind of. Because you could say, oh, well, you know, like, if you're looking at ice deck, do I look at a heavy ice kind of Ultim? I think Lexi just does it the best. It gets to be proactive, because aggro decks can break the oppression, can break the kind of what you're trying to do to them with trying to slow the game down. But when you're Lexi and you're putting on damage at the same time, and you're saying, like, here's 3 on hit effects, like, you know, okay, if you don't stop this, you're going to have to pay 2 resources and you're going to lose 2 cards from your hand. Like that, or you're going to get multiple frostbites. Like, that is a lot that's happening here. So I do think Lexi can potentially be in a really, really good spot. I'd say, like, Kano is a meta pick as well. You know, again, if you're expecting, like, a lot of Fi and a lot of Ultim, it could potentially be, you know, could be a pick. If you're expecting a lot of Dash, I'm less keen on playing Kano personally, but we'll see. You know, we saw Chuheng top 8 both events in Singapore over the weekend with it. What other kind of meta picks are out there, Brendan? Anything else you see?
I really like Lexi. To be honest, like, I don't play much Lexi, but if the meta looks very saturated by aggressive decks, like Iyslander can beat those decks. It can draw the correct side of its deck and sort of shut them down. But I feel like Lexi, more often than not, will kind of just like dismantle those decks. I'm more calling it on my knowledge of like playing Briar into Lexi, and it can just feel so freaking miserable. Because I remember back in the Battle Hardened here in Dallas, in the previous season, there was a Lexi player that won undefeated in Swiss and was just absolutely dumpstering all those Fis and Briars, and that's what it feels like. It feels like if you're on the Briar side, you're on the Fi side. There's just like sometimes there's nothing you can do. You're like, I just need them to draw the absolute. Yeah, like garbanzo beans of freaking hands to get back into this game. It just tends to be that the Lexi deck is a bit narrow in terms of what it can compete against. It tends to struggle against the Guardians.
Yeah,
Jermai.
Yeah, I agree. I think Viserai is the other deck that we haven't really touched on at all, and I think the problem with that is that as an aggressive Runeblade, Briar is doing it better as this kind of potential mid-range deck. Maybe that's where it finds a spot. It's like a really open. I think Viserai can perform in a really open meta because you can have this really clear game plan like we talked about before. It's also quite good into Guardians. It can kind of do it all. So that's where I think Viserai kind of falls in the meta. Potentially quite a good week 1 pick into a really open meta if that's what you expect. Otherwise, it's a deck that I'm less looking at. The question I have, though, that we haven't really talked about this, we've talked a bit about Reiner, but how good is Brute really? Like, because my experience so far in testing is that it's not good enough, whether it's Livia, whether it's Reiner. And my kind of what I'll point to is that the players that have been seeing success, these are the players who play Reiner or Livia week in, week out, know the decks inside and out, can gain their 100% edge or close to in every single sort of spot, and, you know, are putting up some results. Like, it hasn't put up the biggest results, but it has put up some results. But my experience so far is that it isn't good enough to compete. Like, to me, it's like tier 3. Like, it's not even in the top 2 tiers.
I mean, so kind of the way I would speak to that is that if I was looking at the upcoming ProQuest season, Reinhardt is not even, like, I'm not even considering it. Like, it's not even an option. But I can't I can't deny the results it's seen. Like, it's seen results and people have seen success. Those people are just not me, and I don't think they're going to be me either, especially when I'm looking at some of these bigger, like these larger ProQuests in my region. And when I say larger, it's not because they're way harder to win because the people are way better. No, it's just like the meta can be super diverse, and it's like I'm not going to bring Reinhardt to like this like crazy freaking meta. I would probably rather bring Reinhardt to a meta that I can sort of predict and expect a bit more. But yeah, I mean, can't deny results. Like, people are seeing success with it. There's power there. I would not even consider the deck at this point.
That's my takeaway as well. Is like, if I want to play Reinhardt in a bit more of a focused meta where I can kind of target my deck list a little bit more. That's what I've played Reinhardt in the past. But again, you know, I think this goes back to something you said 2 weeks ago in our How to Win a ProQuest episode, which is you talked about, you know, picking a deck and metagaming. And then one of the things you said is ultimately one of the best ways to find success is to play what you know. And I think that's what we've seen with players like this is they know them inside and out. They do really well with these heroes. They maybe the 10% they lose on some of these matchups, they pick up with just their ability to play these heroes and extract as much, you know, potential in each of the game scenarios as possible. And I think that's what we're seeing. You know, Azalea, for instance, we saw Azalea top 8 Polish nationals and make a really deep run. You know, I think Azalea is actually pretty good in this meta. You know, there's decks. If you play a hero and you know it inside and out, I think often just playing that hero is often a correct decision.
To be honest with you, Hayden, that is just Flesh and Blood Classic Constructed right now, and has been since Prism was banned. To be honest, like, yeah, that's what the meta we're in is. Like, you can't get a big enough edge playing the best deck, so you might as well just play the deck that you're comfortable with, that you're going to make the least mistakes on, unless you're a very high caliber player and you know your decks are basically interchangeable and you can get a bit of an edge by maybe playing the Icelander deck or playing the Phi deck. You can bring pretty much anything to a ProQuest, and even to a Calling, and win. And that's where we are in Flesh and Blood right now. We probably won't be there forever, but we can look at the recent data from these Battle Hardens, and we could say, yeah, there isn't a Starvo in Dynasty. That didn't happen, right? There's no broken hero that's just everybody's going to pick it up and play the ProQuest. Dash looked like it was potentially moving in that direction after the first tournament, but we see it pull back. And I think that you should just play what you're comfortable with, and what you enjoy at these ProQuests.
Agree. There's two different pathways you can take. Let's round it out. Let's talk a bit about where this metagame is moving. You know, I think we're going to see, my kind of takeaway from all this data and where we're going to see things is we're still going to see Icelander. It is going to perform. It is going to have a good season. I think that is my prediction. I think Fire is going to be a great pick. Does it beat Dash? Is that kind of the deck that is really going to prime Dash? If so, then yes, I think Fire is going to do even better. I think we're going to see a reasonable amount of Dash in the early weeks because it is solid. There's a lot of new tools. It's exciting. It's fun to play. There's a lot of different ways you can build it. Mechanoid's cool. I guess the kind of question that kind of lingers on my kind of lips as we head into the first week is like, is this just an aggro meta? And is that why we're going to see people make anti-aggro picks? And where does it devolve from there? If it is an aggro meta in week 1, I think it sort of starts to evolve into more of this, you know, making counter picks. It's really good for Icelander if that's the case. People start to make counter picks. I think that's probably how we're going to see it unfold.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to. Sorry, I was just trying to think about that question.
It's hard.
How do I define an aggro meta in Flesh and Blood? And is this that? Like, I think that almost like numerically, like in some of these top 8s, it's like looking kind of like that. I mean, we see a lot of aggro decks just doing really well, and it seems to float to the top of our list when we think about best decks. Like they're mostly aggro decks. It doesn't feel like an aggro meta per se. Like when I think about aggro metas, I think back to the freaking Briar Winters and like all this stuff. But yeah, it feels pretty open. I think that the easiest decks to potentially play and the decks that you can just see immediate success with might be the more aggressive decks. But if it was me, like I might bring Kano to a ProQuest, but I don't think it's the best pick. I would probably pick Icelander. Like I think Icelander's well positioned. It's like a very, very toolbox deck. It can win against pretty much anything, it feels like, and it can be very consistent, but also consistently bad in some cases, as we've seen. So yeah, maybe it's an aggro meta, Hayden. I'm not sure, but I would trend towards something like Icelander in this meta. Well,
that's kind of my last question is, what would we choose right now? My 3 decks that I would potentially play at a ProQuest week 1, Dash, Briar, or Kano. Those are the decks I'm looking at for, a mix of results, a mix of meta calls, a mix of personal preference.
Yeah, for me, it is Kano, Dash, and Icelander. And totally don't know which one. I would say the lowest on my list there is Dash, because that's just like, Hayden, give me list. Do you have list? Like,
but it's both on our list. We both have Dash, so there you
it's
go.
like, do you have list for me to play? If so, give me list. But if not, yeah, I'm probably going to be playing Icelander. It's just tried and true for me. And I might spike a ProQuest or two with Kano. It's like, it's always going to be in my bag. It's always there. Like,
It's
Kano
literally always in my bag.
Yeah, Kano into like a hyper aggressive meta or like a dash meta, or honestly ProQuest in general. I just don't think that like Kano's a great pick. It's very much I think out of any deck we've ever talked about or played, Kano is the most meta pick deck. So when you go into these ProQuests, which are mostly unknown, Kano's just not great.
Can be tough. All right, Brendan, anything to plug before we sign off for the week?
No, like I said earlier in the top of the pod, for the upcoming deck techs that you want to see on Arsenal Pass, if there's any players you want us to get in contact with and feature on the channel, let us know. Super helpful. We would love to facilitate that, and get that set up on the channel. But for the upcoming ProQuest season, do expect a lot of deck techs and deck guides coming out of Arsenal Pass, stuff to help you all level up and be successful in the upcoming ProQuest season.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've been playing a bit. All right, Brendan, that's going to do it for this week's pod. If you do want to engage with us on Twitter, you can find us at BrendanAPG, at Fian_Dale. Big shout out to all of our Arsenal Pass patrons. We do have a lot more content coming for you. We've got another pod for December coming shortly as well. Thank you to all you for your support. And that's going to do it, Brendan. Until next time, we'll see you next week.
See y'all.